Welcome back to Mr. English Lab. This is the channel where we learn English through ideas, reflections, and stories that help us grow, not just in language, but also as human beings. Today's episode starts with a strange and powerful phrase, die before you die. At first, it sounds confusing, maybe even scary. How can someone die before they die? It sounds like a riddle or a line from an old poem. And actually, it is. This phrase comes from ancient spiritual teachings, and it was made famous by a 13th century Persian poet named Rumi. He once wrote, "Die before you die, so that you do not die when you die." It sounds mysterious, doesn't it? But today, we're not talking about death in the physical sense. We're not talking about fear or loss or the end of life. What this phrase really means is freedom. It's about letting go of the parts of ourselves that keep us stuck, the habits, fears, and stories that hold us back from living fully. Think of it like this. Have you ever wanted to start over? To reinvent yourself? Maybe after a breakup, a big change in your career, or even a quiet moment when you looked at yourself and thought, I don't know who I've become. That feeling, that quiet urge to begin again, is the first whisper of dying before you die. It's the beginning of transformation. Across different traditions, Sufism, Stoic philosophy, Buddhism, and even modern psychology, there's a shared idea. If you can face your ego, your fears, and your attachments now, while you are alive, you can be reborn into a clearer, lighter, and freer version of yourself. So why does this matter? Because many of us live our lives on autopilot. We go through our days reacting instead of choosing. We try to please others. We chase approval. We repeat the same patterns because they feel safe and familiar, even if they don't make us happy. We wear identities like masks. I'm the strong one. I'm the successful one. I'm the kind one. I'm the smart one. But sometimes, those masks become heavy. They stop us from seeing who we really are underneath. So this episode is an invitation, not to physically die, of course, but to let go. To release the roles, the labels, and the old stories that no longer feel true. To ask yourself, are these still mine? Do they still fit who I really am? As we move forward, I'll share reflections and questions that might gently challenge the way you see yourself. Don't worry, this isn't about judgment. It's about awakening. It's about learning to live with more honesty, more awareness, and more peace. So, are you ready? Let's take a deep breath together. Let's step into the unknown. Let's begin the journey of dying before we die, the journey of transformation, freedom, and self-discovery. Part 2. The identity we wear. Before we can let go, before we can die before we die, we first need to understand what we're holding on to. So, let's begin with a simple but powerful question. Who are you? Take a moment with that. Really think about it. Most people, when they're asked this question, answer with facts. I'm a teacher. I'm a father. I'm from Brazil. I'm an introvert. I'm a perfectionist. These answers describe what we do, where we're from, or how we behave, but they don't always describe who we truly are. Who are you beyond your job, your roles, your habits, and your labels? Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you stop trying to be someone? That's where the real journey begins, not outside of you, but inside. And that's what we'll keep exploring in this episode, step by step, word by word. Maybe you've said things like this before. I'm the kind of person who always puts others first. And there's nothing wrong with that. These answers are normal, familiar, even comforting. They sound polite. They make sense in conversation. But if we look a little closer, something interesting appears. Most of those answers don't really describe who we are. They describe what we do, where we come from, or how we've learned to behave over time. In other words, they're layers, roles, labels, and descriptions we've picked up, sometimes on purpose, but often without even noticing. We all wear identities. Some of them were given to us early in life, by family, by culture, by school. Others we collect as we grow, through our experiences, our jobs, our friendships, and our struggles. Over time, we build what's called a self-concept, a story we tell ourselves about who we are and what we stand for. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In many ways, these identities give us a sense of safety and stability. They help us find our place in a world that can feel uncertain. They give us structure, belonging, and even a simple way to introduce ourselves when we meet someone new. But here's where things get tricky. As time passes, we start to become attached to those roles. So attached that we begin to believe they are permanent, that they define us completely. We forget that these identities are not fixed. They were shaped by a certain moment in our life, a certain culture, a certain set of expectations. Think about it. How often have you said something like, "I could never do that, it's just not me," or "I'm not the type of person who takes risks"? Those statements sound like facts, but they're not. They're beliefs we've accepted and repeated for so long that we don't even question them anymore. And when we hold on to those beliefs too tightly, identity becomes a kind of armor. An invisible shield we wear to protect ourselves from discomfort, uncertainty, or change. We hide behind our job titles. We play the roles we know, the responsible one, the quiet one, the fixer, the helper. We act in ways that match the image we've built, even when that image no longer fits. But here's the paradox. The same armor that protects us also traps us. Because when we hold on too tightly to who we think we are, we close the door to who we might become. We limit our choices. We turn down new opportunities because they don't fit our brand. We stay in relationships or careers that no longer feel alive, simply because they match the story we've built about ourselves. So let me ask you again, and this time, really pause before you answer. Who are you really? If you remove the labels, your job, your nationality, your relationship status, your personality type, what would be left? This is where the conversation gets deeper. At the heart of all this lies a concept called the ego. Not ego in the arrogant sense, but in the psychological sense. The ego is the part of your mind that creates and maintains a sense of identity. It's the voice that says, "I am this. I'm not that. People like me don't do things like that." It's always comparing, defending, and proving, always trying to protect the image it has built over time. Now, the ego isn't the enemy. It's doing its job, trying to keep you safe, trying to help you survive in a complex social world. The problem begins when we mistake the ego for our true self. When we start to believe that the collection of our roles, habits, preferences, and memories is all that we are. But here's the truth. The self is much more fluid than we're taught to believe. You are not a fixed character in a rigid story. You are a living, changing, growing human being, always capable of becoming something new. You are not a fixed being. You're a dynamic, living, changing human being, constantly growing, shifting, and adapting. And if we want to live with more freedom and authenticity, we have to stop clinging to the identities that no longer serve us. We have to start exploring what lies beneath them, who we are underneath the layers. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. Letting go of an identity can feel like a kind of small death. If you've always been the high achiever, who are you without the gold stars? If you've always been the caregiver, who are you when you finally put your own needs first? If you've built your entire self-worth around being the smart one or the strong one, what happens when life humbles you? These moments can feel scary because they shake the image we've spent years building. But here's the good news. When the outer identity begins to fade, something deeper always remains. Beneath all the roles and stories, there's a quieter self, a part of you that doesn't need to perform, impress, or prove anything. A part that doesn't need validation because it already feels whole. And that's what dying before you die really means. It's not about destroying yourself. It's about releasing the illusions, the false ideas and masks you've mistaken for your essence. It's about loosening your grip on the costume so you can finally feel the air on your skin. So here's a reflection to carry with you. What parts of your identity feel natural, like they flow from who you truly are? And what parts feel more like a performance, something you do to be accepted, respected, or loved? Take a moment with that question. Be honest with yourself. Because in the next part of our journey, we'll talk about what it truly means to let go, not to disappear or collapse, but to make space. Space for something more honest, more fluid, and more alive. The death of the ego. Not as grim as it sounds. Now that we've taken a closer look at the identities we wear, the roles, the stories, the labels, let's go deeper into the heart of today's episode. What does it really mean to die before you die? What exactly is supposed to die? This is where we meet the concept of the ego. And just to be clear, when I say ego, I don't mean arrogance or self-importance, the way we often use the word in everyday talk. I'm talking about something more subtle and far more universal. The ego, in this context, is the psychological structure, the mental identity that we build over time. It's made up of our beliefs, fears, memories, and all the social conditioning that shape how we see ourselves and how we show up in the world. Now here's something important. The ego is not evil. It's not a villain living inside you. In fact, it serves an important purpose. It gives you a sense of continuity, a feeling that you are you. It helps you function in society. It protects you emotionally and psychologically from feeling unsafe or lost. You could think of the ego as a bodyguard. It stands in front of you, always alert, always trying to defend the version of you that it believes is safe or acceptable. But over time, that bodyguard can get too loud and too rigid. It starts to confuse safety with sameness. It tells you to stay in your comfort zone, to repeat old patterns, to hold on to the image you've created even when that image becomes a cage. And that's when the suffering begins. Because now, the ego isn't serving you anymore, it's controlling you. So when we talk about the death of the ego, we're not talking about erasing your personality or losing your identity completely. We're talking about loosening your grip, letting go of the habits of mind that keep you small, defensive, or afraid of change. It means stepping back from the automatic stories that play in your head, the ones that say, I can't do that. I always mess up. People like me don't belong there. It means doing a kind of mental decluttering, a quiet cleaning of the old beliefs you've outgrown. It's not dramatic or violent. It's gentle. It's freeing. It's the beginning of meeting yourself again, not the version shaped by fear, but the version shaped by awareness. For most of my life, I carried a very strong identity. I was the achiever. I was the person who always got things done. The one who showed up early, stayed late, and never missed a deadline. I worked hard, I delivered, I exceeded expectations. On the surface, it looked like a strength, and in many ways, it was. That achiever mindset helped me grow, reach goals, and feel capable. But underneath, it was also deeply tied to fear. A fear of not being enough. A fear of being invisible if I wasn't constantly performing. A fear that my worth depended on how much I accomplished. So I pushed. I worked longer hours than I needed to. I said yes to everything. I measured my value by my productivity. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. That identity, the achiever, became so intertwined with who I thought I was that I couldn't imagine existing without it. But life has a way of testing the stories we tell ourselves. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. I burned out physically, mentally, emotionally. I felt drained, anxious, disconnected. I started questioning everything I had believed about success, value, and who I was supposed to be. And in that discomfort, something began to shift. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, I started to see that the achiever wasn't my true self. It was a survival strategy. A role I had learned to play to feel safe, seen, and loved. Letting go of that identity wasn't easy. At first, it felt like a kind of death. I felt exposed, uncertain, even a little lost. But over time, I realized that what was dying wasn't me. It was the pressure, the endless need to prove myself, the weight of always having to be someone. And in that space, that quiet after the letting go, something softer began to emerge. Something more real. A self that didn't need to perform or impress, but simply be. This, in essence, is what the death of the ego really is. It's not a dramatic explosion. It's a gradual exhale, a gentle peeling away of old habits, fears, and expectations. And what remains isn't emptiness. It's a deeper version of you, one that is lighter, freer, and more grounded in truth. This is where language becomes important. When we say what no longer serves you, we're talking about anything, a belief, a behavior, a mindset that might have once helped you survive, but now holds you back. Maybe it's the story that says, I always have to be strong. Or the thought that, I'm not creative. Or the habit of judging yourself for feeling too much. These are ego defenses, not signs of weakness, but signs of conditioning. And the good news is, they're not permanent. The ego isn't set in stone. It's more like a costume, one you've worn for so long that you forgot it was a costume. But once you see it, you can choose, piece by piece, to take it off. So, if you're listening to this and thinking, I've always been the peacekeeper, or I've always been the independent one, or I'm just not the kind of person who takes risks, ask yourself, is that still true? Or is that simply what I've gotten used to believing? Because when we talk about dying before you die, we're talking about dying to those fixed identities. We're talking about letting go of who you thought you had to be, so you can step into who you actually are. It's not grim. It's not dark. It's liberating. Because when you stop clinging to the ego's narrow version of yourself, you make space for something wider, a life that feels more spacious, more alive, and more aligned. So here's a reflection to carry forward. What identity are you still holding on to, not because it feels true, but because it feels familiar? And if you were to set it down, even just for a moment, who might you become? Quieting the inner noise. So, let's slow down for a moment. Not just in this episode, but in ourselves. Let's pause. Let's take a breath. Let's sit with the quiet that appears when we stop trying to be someone and simply allow ourselves to be. Before anything can truly change, before we can let go, shift direction, or see ourselves clearly, we have to face something that almost everyone lives with, but very few ever notice directly. It's the constant stream of thoughts running through our minds. We all have it, that inner voice. Sometimes it sounds like our own. Sometimes it sounds like a parent, a teacher, or an old memory of someone who once guided or criticized us. And it never really turns off, does it? It's like a background radio that keeps playing, narrating, judging, worrying, comparing. It tells you what to do, what not to do. It wonders what others might be thinking. It replays old arguments. It rehearses future conversations that may never even happen. It loops on endless what-ifs. What if I fail? What if I said the wrong thing? What if I'm not enough? This is what we often call mental chatter. At first, it might seem harmless, just thoughts, right? But over time, that chatter quietly begins to shape how we experience reality. It fuels anxiety, tension, and self-doubt. It keeps us trapped in patterns of overthinking and fear. You've probably heard phrases like getting in your own head or going down a rabbit hole. Both describe how easily our thoughts can spiral, often without us even noticing. Have you ever realized how much energy it takes to think about the same problem again and again without ever solving it? That's rumination. It's like chewing the same piece of gum over and over. The flavor's gone, but we just keep chewing. And it's not just about regrets or mistakes. We overthink future possibilities. We second-guess our choices. We worry about how others see us. We replay and rehearse endlessly, and it's exhausting. But because this feels normal, because everyone does it, we rarely stop to ask ourselves, is this actually helping me? Now, let's be clear. Thinking itself is not the enemy. Our ability to think, reflect, and imagine is one of the greatest human gifts. The problem begins when the mind becomes too noisy, when thoughts run on autopilot spinning, judging, analyzing, without awareness. When that happens, we lose connection with a deeper kind of intelligence. We lose presence. We miss the life that's unfolding right in front of us. So, what's the alternative? Should we try to stop thinking? Not exactly. Trying to stop thinking usually makes the mind even louder. The real goal is not to silence the mind, but to observe it. To create a little bit of space between you and your thoughts. Because the moment you start observing your thoughts, instead of automatically believing them, following them, or reacting to them, you begin to reclaim your inner freedom. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices them. Here's one of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself. When was the last time I simply noticed my thoughts, without reacting to them? Try it sometime. You might be surprised by what you find. Most people, maybe most of us, never actually watch the mind with curiosity. We listen to it, obey it, argue with it, believe it, but rarely do we just observe it like a passing cloud in the sky. And that simple act of watching, that moment of awareness, is the beginning of quieting the inner noise. We're so identified with our thoughts that we forget something essential. We're not the voice inside our head. We're the one who hears it. That simple realization changes everything. And this is where certain practices become incredibly powerful, not because they're trendy or spiritual, but because they retrain us to relate to our thoughts in a new way. Take mindfulness, for example. It's as simple as sitting still, breathing, and observing. Not trying to control your thoughts or force them away, but allowing them to rise and fall, to come and go like clouds drifting across the open sky. You don't chase them. You don't fight them. You just notice and let them pass. Another gentle but profound tool is journaling. Not the polished, picture-perfect kind, but the raw kind, where you pour everything onto the page without filtering. You write what's real, what's messy, what's unedited. And something beautiful happens when you do. You begin to see your thoughts as objects rather than truths. Patterns emerge. You start to notice which thoughts are rooted in fear, which ones belong to someone else's expectations, and which ones, if any, are actually worth listening to. And then there's the simplest of all practices, the breath. Just pausing to take 3 slow, deep breaths. It sounds basic, but it's powerful. Because the breath always happens now. It's not in the past or the future. It's in this moment, the only moment that's real. What's important to understand is that these practices won't erase your thoughts. They don't need to. Their purpose is to remind you that you are not your thoughts. And when you can remember that, when you can watch the mind's endless stream without being pulled into every worry, story, or judgment, you start to uncover something deeper. A quiet stillness beneath the noise. A steady awareness that doesn't rise and fall with every thought. It's from that stillness that clarity emerges. Creativity awakens. Self-awareness deepens. You might even begin to notice how many of your thoughts are outdated, built on old fears, false assumptions, or familiar patterns of self-doubt. You might see how the mind often resists change, not because change is wrong, but because the ego feels safer when things stay predictable, even if predictable isn't making you happy. So here's a gentle challenge for the next time you feel anxious, overwhelmed, or tangled in thoughts. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to think your way out. Just pause. Breathe. Observe. You'll be amazed at what begins to shift when you stop reacting and start witnessing. And maybe, just maybe, the next time your inner voice begins to spiral, you'll recognize it for what it is, a well-meaning narrator, but not the whole story. The liberating power of letting go. Imagine walking through life with a heavy backpack strapped to your shoulders. You've been carrying it for so long that you've stopped noticing the weight, but it's always there. Every step takes more effort than it needs to. And inside that backpack? It's not food or tools or anything that truly helps you. It's packed with old fears, outdated stories, impossible expectations, and beliefs about who you're supposed to be. Some of it isn't even yours. It was handed to you by your family, your culture, your past. Now imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to stop walking and take that backpack off. To set it down. To feel how much lighter you really are without it. That's what we're talking about today, the liberating power of letting go. Because once we start to see the mental and emotional patterns we've been holding on to, the identities, the internal narratives, the habits of control, we face a choice. We can keep clinging to them out of fear or familiarity, or we can begin to release them. And when we do, something beautiful happens. We find space. Not emptiness, not nothingness, but a spaciousness within us, room for something new to grow. Letting go isn't weakness. It's one of the most courageous things we can do. And it doesn't always happen in grand gestures. Often, it's quiet, subtle, invisible to others. It might look like loosening your grip on a situation you can't control, or releasing expectations about how your life should look by now. It might mean dropping the need to constantly prove yourself, to appear strong, capable, successful, or put together. And when you stop clinging to those things, something shifts inside. Energy that was trapped in overthinking and anxiety begins to flow again. Mental clutter clears. Emotional baggage lightens. And suddenly, you can breathe more deeply. Not just physically, but psychologically. Let me share something personal. A few years ago, I reached a breaking point. On the outside, everything looked stable. But inside, I was exhausted, chasing success, meeting expectations, checking every box, but never feeling fulfilled. Even small tasks began to feel overwhelming. Something had to change. But the change didn't come through control or strategy. It came through surrender. I stopped trying to force things into place. I stopped pretending I had it all figured out. And most importantly, I let go of the image of the person I thought I had to be, the one who was always fine, always capable, always ahead. That surrender didn't lead to collapse. It led to clarity. And from that clarity came a new kind of energy, not from pressure or perfectionism, but from alignment. Here's what I've learned. You can't grow if you're clinging. Growth needs space. It needs oxygen. And when you're holding tightly to certainty, to control, or to an old version of yourself, there's no room for transformation. Letting go isn't about losing who you are. It's about creating space for who you're becoming. From the outside, that breaking open looks like the end. But from the inside, it's the beginning. That's the paradox of growth. The very thing that looks like falling apart is often the process of coming alive. Rebirth doesn't always arrive with fireworks or grand realizations. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. It happens in the way you speak to yourself in the morning, in the way you stop apologizing for existing, in the way you finally feel safe enough to rest. You begin to move through life differently. You stop trying to earn your worth and start remembering that you already have it. You stop performing strength and start discovering what real softness feels like. You stop clinging to certainty and start trusting yourself to meet whatever comes. This is what it means to be reborn. Not as someone new, but as someone true. The self that was never lost. Just buried under layers of expectation and fear. And that's the invitation of dying before you die. To shed what's false so that what's real can finally breathe. To stop chasing identity and start living from essence. To wake up each day with a little less armor. And a little more openness to the mystery of being alive. So let me leave you with this. Maybe the goal was never to find yourself at all. Maybe it was to remember yourself. The you that exists beneath the noise, beneath the labels, beneath the striving. The one who has always been quietly waiting, patiently whispering, I'm still here. In daily life, micro deaths and micro rebirths. We often think transformation has to be big. A radical career change, a deep spiritual awakening, a dramatic moment where everything suddenly makes sense. But the truth is, most transformation happens quietly, in small, ordinary moments that almost go unnoticed. Every time you choose honesty over pretending, that's a small death. Every time you forgive instead of holding on, that's a small death. Every time you release a grudge, a fear, a habit that no longer fits, you're dying before you die. And in the space that opens up afterward, something new takes root. A deeper breath, a softer heart, a clearer sense of what truly matters. These are the micro rebirths. Moments when you return to yourself again and again. It might happen when you finally say no to something that drains you, or yes to something that scares you in the best way. It might happen when you stop replaying an old mistake, or when you allow yourself to rest without guilt. It might even happen in the smallest pause. A quiet morning, a long exhale, a gentle thought that says, I don't need to be anyone else right now. That's rebirth. That's aliveness. Not a single grand event, but a continuous unfolding moment by moment, breath by breath. So maybe dying before you die isn't about one big leap into the unknown. Maybe it's about 1,000 small surrenders. Letting go of what you thought you had to be, so you can remember again and again who you already are. Because in the end, the goal isn't perfection. It's presence. It's peace. It's freedom. Maybe you spoke up for yourself when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Maybe you forgave someone who never apologized. Maybe you finally stopped waiting for permission to rest. Those are all micro rebirths, moments when you remembered your own aliveness. And that's the beauty of this process. It doesn't demand perfection or constant awareness. It just asks for presence, for a willingness to notice when you're clinging, and the courage to soften your grip. Some days, you'll do it gracefully. Other days, not at all. That's okay. The point isn't to get it right. The point is to keep coming back, to keep beginning again. Because transformation isn't a single event. It's a rhythm, a pulse, a conversation between who you were and who you're becoming. And every time you pause, breathe, and choose differently, even in the smallest way, you're rewriting your story from the inside out. So the next time you catch yourself reacting out of habit or fear, try this. Pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what if I let this version of me, the one that needs control or approval or certainty, gently die right now? And then notice what comes alive in its place. That's the quiet miracle of inner rebirth. You don't have to go searching for it in faraway places or life-altering experiences. It's happening here, in these ordinary moments, in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you listen, in the way you choose to begin again and again and again. We can also find echoes of this truth in nature-centered traditions. In many indigenous cultures, death and rebirth are not opposites, but partners, two halves of the same cycle. The falling leaves feed the soil. The burned forest makes way for new life. Change is not something to fear but to honor, because every ending carries the seed of renewal. Even in modern psychology, we see this same wisdom reflected. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of integrating the hidden parts of ourselves, of allowing the old persona to dissolve so the true self can emerge. It's not so different from Rumi's surrender or the Buddha's release. Different languages, same invitation. Let the false self die so the authentic one can live. Across time, across cultures, the pattern repeats. Whether it's a mystic's poem, a hero's descent, a monk's meditation, or a forest's regeneration, they all point toward the same understanding that life's deepest growth happens through cycles of letting go. And maybe that's what this whole journey is reminding us, that death and rebirth aren't just spiritual ideas or mythic stories. They're happening in us all the time. Every breath out is a tiny death. Every breath in, a quiet rebirth. So, as you move through your own days, notice those small cycles, the moments you release, the moments you begin again. Trust that every time something falls away, something truer is waiting to take its place. Because to die before you die is not about losing yourself. It's about remembering who you've been all along. A daily practice of dying to fixed views and being reborn into openness and compassion. This idea might sound abstract, but it's something we live every day in small and simple ways. And to bring it closer to our modern lives, think about the stories we love in movies, books, or even our own experiences. In a film like Inside Out, for example, the main character learns that joy and sadness can coexist. She lets go of the idea that happiness means feeling good all the time, and instead learns that being fully alive means embracing the full range of emotions. That's a kind of inner death, the death of a simple, comfortable idea, and a rebirth into something deeper, more real. You can see the same thing in countless novels, where characters lose what they thought defined them, their roles, their jobs, their relationships, and through that loss, discover a truer sense of self. Ancient stories, modern stories, spiritual stories, even stories about ordinary people, they all whisper the same truth. To truly become who you are, something must end. Something inside you must let go so that something new can live. So, I want to invite you to reflect for a moment. What story have you been telling yourself about who you have to be? Is it the story of the achiever who must always succeed? The loyal friend who can never disappoint anyone? The strong one who can't afford to show weakness? Or maybe it's the story that says you always have to be liked, approved of, or in control. And where did that story come from? Is it really yours, or is it a script handed to you by family, culture, or past experiences? When we start to notice these stories, we give ourselves space to question them. We can ask, do these stories still serve me? Do they reflect my truth or someone else's expectations? That's where real transformation begins, not by fixing ourselves, but by rewriting the story we live by. When that inner narrative shifts, everything else begins to shift too. How we see ourselves, how we move through the world, how we relate to others. In this way, dying before you die isn't just a personal idea. It's a shared human experience, something that connects us across time, culture, and language. It's a reminder that to truly live, we must be willing to let go. And as we come to the end of this reflection, I want to leave you with a gentle thought, one that has guided many seekers and thinkers throughout history. The phrase, "to die before you die," is not about giving up. It's about waking up. It's about realizing that the ego, that busy, protective, controlling part of us, doesn't have to be our enemy. We don't have to destroy it. We just have to stop letting it define the whole of who we are. Releasing the ego is like expanding your sense of identity, opening the door to a wider, deeper experience of life. You're not losing yourself when you let go. You're becoming more yourself. It's like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. The old form falls away, but what remains is something freer, lighter, and fully alive. So, hold this question in your mind. What would change if you truly believed that nothing essential can ever be lost? That your true self, the core of who you are, is always there, waiting beneath the surface of stories, fears, and habits. When you live with that trust, the fear of change begins to soften. You start to see endings not as failures, but as beginnings. You start to meet discomfort not as a threat, but as a doorway. Because every ending holds a beginning, and every death carries within it the promise of new life. You don't need to have all the answers right now. The inner journey is lifelong, sometimes smooth, sometimes messy. but that's perfectly okay. Curiosity and kindness toward yourself will carry you farther than perfection ever could. So as you move forward from this moment, keep asking yourself gentle questions. When was the last time I truly listened to my inner voice? How much of my life am I living consciously, intentionally? And what small thing can I let go of today, a thought, a fear, a pattern, to make space for a quiet rebirth tomorrow? Transformation is not a one-time event. It's a daily practice found in small choices, in quiet pauses, in moments of surrender and renewal. Every breath is both a letting go and a beginning again. If these words have touched something inside you, share them. Talk about them. Journal about them. Sit with them in silence. Make them part of your ongoing conversation with yourself. Because in the end, to die before you die is not about loss, it's about life. It's about living fully, deeply, and authentically in each moment. Thank you for being here with me, for listening, for reflecting, for growing. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep coding your own story in English. One word, one breath, one moment at a time.